October 1st, 2013. A quiet Tuesday afternoon inside San Francisco's Glen Park Library. A 29-year-old sits with his laptop open, logged into the command center of a billion-dollar criminal empire no one around him can see. His name is Ross Ulbricht, Eagle Scout, physics graduate. And according to the FBI agents now closing in, the dark web's most wanted man. In seconds, everything collapses. But the story of how a quiet libertarian idealist built the internet's most infamous illegal marketplace, and what it cost him, begins years before this moment. Ross William Ulbricht entered the world on March 27, 1984, in the suburbs of Austin, Texas. His father, an engineer, and his mother, a schoolteacher, filled the family home with books, experiments, and a quiet sense of discipline. From a young age, Ross was drawn to systems, how things worked, how rules shaped outcomes. He built model rockets in the backyard, fixed broken radios from garage sales, and lost himself in the logic of chess and mathematics. By age 15, he had earned the rank of Eagle Scout, the highest honor in the Boy Scouts of America. The badge wasn't just a trophy for Ross. It was a test of self-reliance and responsibility, demanding hundreds of hours of service, outdoor leadership, and a written code of honor. The values he absorbed, personal accountability, community service, and a belief in ethical conduct, would become the backbone of his adult life, even as his ambitions grew more radical. School came easily to him, but he never coasted. At Westlake High, he excelled in science fairs and debate tournaments, often staying after class to help classmates or challenge teachers with questions about physics and ethics. Friends remember him as reserved but driven, the sort of student who would spend weekends volunteering at local parks or tutoring younger scouts. His parents kept a framed certificate on the living room wall. Eagle Scout, Ross W. Ulbricht, 1999. It was more than a milestone. It was a sign of a young man who believed deeply in earning his place and living by principle. In 2002, Ross enrolled at the University of Texas at Dallas, majoring in physics. The coursework was rigorous, but he thrived on the challenge, graduating cum laude in 2006. He joined the physics club, spent late nights in the lab, and contributed to undergraduate research on semiconductor materials. Professors described him as meticulous, persistent, and curious, a student who wanted to understand the world at its most fundamental level. After college, Ross set his sights even higher, pursuing a master's in materials science and engineering at Penn State. There, he focused on nanomaterials and quantum dot research, working with cutting-edge technology that blurred the line between science fiction and reality. His academic transcripts, later entered into court records, show a pattern of achievement and restless curiosity. He was not the type to accept easy answers or follow the crowd. Long before anyone called him the dark web's most wanted man, Ross Ulbricht was building a foundation of discipline, intellect, and principle. The same qualities that made him a model scout and a standout student would soon propel him into a world where ideals and actions collided, and where the cost of conviction would be measured in far more than grades or merit badges. Ross Ulbricht's pursuit of freedom moved from theory to blueprint as his 20s unfolded. His bookshelf filled with the works of Ludwig von Mises, Murray Rothbard, and Ayn Rand, each volume annotated with questions about power, consent, and the limits of state authority. In 2009, he cited von Mises and quoted Rothbard, "The state is a parasite," laying out a vision for a marketplace where voluntary exchange replaced regulation. These ideas were not just intellectual exercises. Ulbricht saw technology as the means to realize them. Cryptography offered privacy. Bitcoin, then obscure, promised money without intermediaries, and Tor opened a door to anonymity. Late in 2010, he wrote a white paper for a project he called Underground Brokers, proposing a marketplace that fused Tor's hidden services with Bitcoin's untraceable payments. The goal was a digital bazaar immune to government oversight. By January 2011, the project had a new name, Silk Road. The reference to ancient trade routes was deliberate, evoking commerce that flourished beyond the reach of kings and empires. Ulbricht's manifesto, later seized by the FBI, declared, "Silk Road is a free market for free people. No government, no police, no red tape. All transactions are anonymous. All participants are sovereign." The blueprint called for Tor to shield identities, Bitcoin to handle payments, and a custom escrow system to protect buyers and sellers. Every detail aimed to keep the platform outside the grasp of law enforcement. Ulbricht could not build this alone. Through cryptography mailing lists, he quietly recruited Peter Maas, a security specialist, and Dylan Murphy, a software developer. Their early conversations unfolded over encrypted emails, each party cautious but intrigued. They reviewed the white paper, signed non-disclosure agreements, and debated the technical challenges: how to keep transactions private, how to ensure trust without oversight, how to design a system that could survive scrutiny. The team agreed on strict boundaries. Certain goods, including weapons and child exploitation material, would be banned outright. Ulbricht saw this as a necessary compromise, a way to balance libertarian ideals with the practical need for survival. By the end of January 2011, the code was live. Silk Road's mechanics, Tor for anonymity, Bitcoin for payments, and a decentralized team were in place. The experiment was no longer theoretical. Ulbricht's radical vision was now a functioning platform, poised to test whether his beliefs could withstand the realities of the world he sought to change. On June 1st, 2011, a single headline detonated across the internet. Gawker's expose pulled Silk Road out of the shadows and into the glare of mainstream attention. The story was posted at 4:20 in the afternoon. It didn't just describe the site. It handed readers a roadmap to the dark web's forbidden marketplace. Within hours, Reddit threads erupted with disbelief and fascination. Posts on our Bitcoin and our darknet markets buzzed with users asking how to reach Silk Road, how to buy Bitcoin, how it could possibly be real. Some called it the Amazon for drugs. Others called it a revolution. The numbers spiked overnight. Silk Road's daily visitors soared from a few thousand to nearly 30,000 in less than a week. Alexa rankings leapt, and the site's servers strained under a flood of new traffic. Vendors like Chronic King described inboxes jammed with order requests, cannabis oil, LSD, prescription pills. One vendor wrote, "I woke up to 50 new orders. I thought I was being pranked." For buyers, the experience felt like stepping through a portal. Tor's slow, anonymous connection, the clunky Bitcoin purchase process, the encrypted messages to strangers, each step was both a risk and a thrill. First-time buyers swapped stories on forums, comparing shipping times, packaging tricks, and the surreal feeling of tracking an illegal package through the ordinary postal system. The sense of community and the adrenaline of beating the system became part of the draw. For Ulbricht and his team, the explosion was both validation and a warning. The original codebase buckled under the weight. Security flaws appeared as new users probed for weaknesses. Within 2 weeks, the team rolled out two-factor vendor authentication and new escrow settings to handle a surge in disputes. A forum section was added, modeled after early web communities, to keep the chaos contained. Every upgrade was a race against the next surge, the next bug, the next possible leak. The Gawker article had changed the game. Silk Road was no longer a secret experiment. It was a phenomenon, and every new visitor brought both opportunity and risk. The line between idealism and criminal enterprise, already thin, blurred further with every click. By midsummer 2011, Silk Road had outgrown its own code. The original experiment, built on trust and libertarian ideals, now pulsed with the energy of a full-blown criminal economy. At any given moment, 30,000 listings crowded the marketplace, including psychedelics, prescription pills, counterfeit IDs, and even hacking services. The numbers were staggering. In less than a year, Millions in Bitcoin had passed through Silk Road's escrow wallets. The site's 3.5% commission meant that every transaction, whether for a gram of cannabis or a bulk order of oxycodone, funneled profit to a single account, Dread Pirate Roberts. By the end of 2012, those commissions alone had generated over $13 million in Bitcoin. The scale forced change. Ulbricht's team introduced two-factor authentication for vendors, requiring new cryptographic proofs just to open a seller account. It was a technical arms race. Every security upgrade a response to a new scam, a new threat, a new way the system could be gamed. Disputes between buyers and sellers exploded. The forum, once a place for philosophical debate, filled with complaints, warnings, and the occasional threat. Behind the scenes, the tone of private messages and admin chats shifted. Ulbricht, once focused on voluntary exchange and nonviolence, began to confront the darker realities of operating what the media now called the Amazon for drugs. As competitors and scammers multiplied, so did paranoia. Internal logs and chat records later seized by prosecutors revealed something chilling. Discussions about murder for hire. 4 separate contracts surfaced in the evidence, each promising 0.2 Bitcoin, about $150 at the time, for the elimination of a rival vendor or a suspected informant. The language was clinical, stripped of ideology. Completion meant death. Payment was held in escrow, just like any other transaction. No bodies were ever found. No charges for murder were filed. But the existence of these contracts, the willingness to consider violence as a tool of business, would later become a central argument in court. The line between idealism and criminality, always thin, now seemed almost invisible. In a letter to the judge before sentencing, Ulbricht wrote, "Silk Road was supposed to be about giving people the freedom to make their own choices. I made a terrible mistake." The site's growth had brought not just wealth, but a new kind of moral fracture. Silk Road was no longer just a test of free market theory. It had become a global marketplace where ethics, profit, and survival collided in the shadows. Federal agents Karl Mark Force IV, and Sean Bridges were supposed to be guardians of the law, but behind closed doors, they exploited the chaos of the Silk Road investigation for personal gain. Force, a DEA undercover operative, siphoned off 20,000 Bitcoin, worth millions at the time, by manipulating Silk Road's escrow system. He routed the coins through mixing services, erasing their trail before quietly transferring them into his own accounts. Bridges, a Secret Service cybercrime specialist, used privileged access to the server admin panel to divert another 5,000 Bitcoin to wallets he controlled. Both men pled guilty. Force pled to money laundering and extortion. Bridges pled to theft of government property and wire fraud. Their sentences, 30 months for Force and 22 months for Bridges, stood in stark contrast to the decades handed down to the site's creator. The scale of their theft wasn't just a footnote. It raised urgent questions about the integrity of the entire investigation. Defense attorneys argued that evidence handled by these agents was tainted, that the chain of custody for digital wallets and transaction records could no longer be trusted. In court, the judge ultimately decided that independent forensic analysis was enough to admit the evidence, but the shadow of corruption lingered over every detail. For those watching from the outside, the revelations shattered any simple narrative of good and evil. The very people tasked with dismantling the world's most notorious black market had secretly joined the ranks of profiteers. As the Silk Road case moved toward its climax, the lines between law enforcement and lawbreaking blurred, leaving the public to wonder how much justice could be found in a system so easily compromised. Gary Alford, an IRS investigator working in the background, sat at his computer in a cramped New York office, following a hunch. He typed the word Altoid into Google, cross-referencing it with early Silk Road forum posts. Among the search results, a single slip shattered the shield of anonymity, a post linking Silk Road to an email address, Ross Ulbricht utexas.edu. The address pointed directly to Ross Ulbricht, a name that had lurked at the edges of the investigation for months. Alfred's memo to the FBI, dated July 2012, called it a breakthrough. The digital trail, so carefully hidden behind Tor and Bitcoin, had been pierced by an old university email and a forgotten forum post. The agencies converged. By fall 2013, a joint task force from the FBI, the DEA, and the Secret Service tracked Ulbricht's routine to the Glen Park Public Library in San Francisco. They waited for him to settle in at a public computer. Inside the quiet reading room, agents watched as Ulbricht opened his laptop, a MacBook Pro, and logged into the Silk Road admin panel. At exactly 10:15 in the morning on October 1st, 2013, undercover officers staged a distraction behind him. As Ulbricht turned, agents seized the laptop before he could close the lid or trigger encryption. The device, still live, contained everything investigators needed: admin credentials, chat logs, Bitcoin wallets, and the source code for Silk Road. The arrest unfolded in seconds, but it was the product of years of patient cyber sleuthing. Ulbricht was taken into custody without a struggle, surrounded by books and computer screens. The library, a place of quiet order, became the unlikely stage for the collapse of the world's most notorious digital marketplace. The man who had built an empire on secrecy and code was now in handcuffs, his vision undone by a single digital breadcrumb. Inside the hushed courtroom, Ross Ulbricht stood as Judge Catherine Forrest prepared to deliver a sentence that would reverberate far beyond the walls of the Southern District of New York. The jury had returned guilty verdicts on all 7 counts, including narcotics trafficking, money laundering, computer hacking, and operating a continuing criminal enterprise. Evidence piled high: server logs, Bitcoin transactions, chat records, and Ulbricht's own journals. The prosecution described Silk Road as a vast, ongoing operation that enabled millions in illegal drug sales, shielded by technology and ideology. Judge Forrest spoke directly to Ulbricht, her words measured but unyielding. She cited not only the scale of the crimes, but also the dangerous intent behind the murder-for-hire contracts, even though no deaths were proven and no homicide charges were filed. The sentencing memo described an enterprise that, in the court's view, threatened public health and undermined the rule of law. She handed down the maximum sentence, 2 life sentences without parole plus 40 years, and ordered the forfeiture of $183 million in Bitcoin proceeds. Ulbricht, in a letter to the court, wrote, "Silk Road was supposed to be about giving people the freedom to make their own choices. I made a terrible mistake." The severity of the sentence sent a shockwave through the gallery. For some, it was justice delivered. For others, it was a warning about the cost of challenging the system. The moral weight of the punishment hung in the air, raising questions about justice, proportionality, and the true legacy of the dark web's most wanted man. Outside the courtroom, the story refused to end. A grassroots coalition calling itself Free Ross sprang up almost overnight, gathering more than 150,000 signatures on petitions and drawing support from libertarians, technologists, and civil liberties advocates. Rallies circled federal courthouses, op-eds debated proportionality, and the question of justice became a rallying cry on forums and podcasts. Ulbricht's sentence, 2 life sentences plus 40 years, became a symbol, depending on who you asked, of either necessary deterrence or judicial overreach. But the Silk Road's shadow stretched beyond any one man. Bitcoin, once a fringe experiment, now carried a legacy inseparable from the marketplace that had forced it into the spotlight. Early adopters credited Silk Road with helping Bitcoin cross from theory to reality, embedding it in the DNA of the modern crypto economy. At its peak, nearly 1 in 5 Bitcoin transactions touched Silk Road wallets, and the site's notoriety fueled both adoption and a wave of regulatory scrutiny that shaped the industry for years to come. In January 2025, the White House released a single-page warrant bearing the presidential seal, a full and unconditional pardon for Ross Ulbricht. The news ricocheted through social media and newsrooms, reigniting old arguments about justice, technology, and the power of executive clemency. Within months, the blockchain recorded a new ripple. On June 15th, 2025, 300 Bitcoin moved from a wallet long linked to Silk Road's early days to a fresh address under Ulbricht's control. For some, it was a sign of unfinished business. For others, a second chance. The debate that started in the shadows of the dark web now played out in the open, unresolved, still asking what freedom, responsibility, and punishment should mean in a world remade by code. Today, encrypted marketplaces multiply, Bitcoin is mainstream, and the debate over digital freedom versus law enforcement grows louder. Ross Ulbricht wrote that Silk Road was supposed to be about giving people the freedom to make their own choices, and that he made a terrible mistake. The paradox remains. Technology amplifies both liberation and risk. Every time we log on, that collision between idealism and consequence still shapes the future. Tell us where you stand in the comments.